NASCAR makes its return to Nashville Super Speedway, a different track for the NASCAR Cup Series, but a very familiar result. Kyle Larson gets technically it's his fourth straight NASCAR Cup Series win if you include the All-Star race. He is unstoppable, but everyone afterwards is talking about the facility. Was it a good race? Was it a good track? Did they accommodate for the sellout crowd properly? We're going to get to all that and much more in tonight's Out of the Groove NASCAR race review. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I am coming to you on the road from, what are we calling this, Danny? The Danny B. Clout House?
Danny B. Clout House.
Danny B. Clout House. I'm at Danny B. Talks' house. I'll turn the camera on. You guys say hi. Are you guys ready? Are you guys even decent? I don't know if they can see you guys. Slap shoes. You got Jarrett the Iceberg. Danny, you're over. Oh, there he is. Oh, that's spooky. That lighting is really creepy. He's nuts. All right. Well, we are here. I have a live studio audience. I don't like this. This is unpleasant, but we're going to do our best to unpack everything from Nashville. I'll have a video coming out tomorrow or the next day documenting my entire race day experience. It was a lot of fun, but I am extremely wore out. But we got to get to the nitty gritty, the important stuff. This episode is sponsored by Hitchfire Grills. Danny B, you were grilling some pretty delicious burgers and chicken wings on that thing yesterday, or actually Friday before the Truck Series race. We had a whole cookout. It was delicious. Hitchfire Grills attach directly into your truck. Drive it down the freeway, park it in your tailgating spot, unload the grill. It's ready to go. And I don't know what you thought, Danny, but I thought it was really, really easy to use, really sleek, really convenient. That's Hitchfire Grills. You can check them out. Their link is down in the description below. That's Hitchfire Grills, sponsors of Out of the Groove this week at Nashville. Really made the tailgating experience on Friday one of a kind. So thank you to Hitchfire Grills for doing that. Now, we've got a lot to discuss today. We will talk about Kyle Larson's continued dominance. We'll talk about the top 10, the top finishers, because there were some surprising names that really showed out today. We'll talk about Ricky Stenhouse. Trackhouse gets another top 10. Both Chip Ganassi cars have great runs. Ross Chastain was the show in the final stage of this thing. But we're also going to talk about Nashville Super Speedway. And in fact, we're going to kick things off with that because that's how my day was kicked off, sitting in some traffic this morning before the race began. If you've been following this race on Twitter and I'm sure other social media, you've probably seen many people, drivers and team members included, discussing the efficiency of, I don't know, the parking situation at Nashville Super Speedway. They actually had to delay the start of this race by about 10 minutes to allow for more fans to park their vehicles and get into the stands. Now, I will say, at the time the race was scheduled to start, I was sitting on pit road looking up at the grandstands and they looked to be, I don't know, close to 90% full. So most fans, if not all, made it to their seats in time for the green flag, but certainly traffic and other logistical concerns were very prevalent here tonight. I saw a few reports from people saying that, you know, water was sold out. Many food and beer options were sold out early on in the race, and for a race that takes place in the South in the summer, that's unacceptable. Now, I don't want to throw Nashville Super Speedway under the bus because for a track that sat dormant for most of a decade, I thought much of the facility this week looked good as new, was really, really accommodating, was really nice. Sitting in the grandstands for the Truck and the Cup Series race, view was fantastic. Even though it was a sellout crowd, the seats were comfortable for a, bleachers in a NASCAR track, had plenty of elbow space. It was a really good time, but this is a trend that's becoming all too common amongst not just Nashville Super Speedway, but also SMI tracks, ISC tracks. I talked about this a while back, and this is when I first noticed it, but last year when I went to the Bristol All-Star race at Bristol during the summer, they ran out of water. The concessions ran out of water before the All-Star race even began. That was a problem because it was 95 degrees outside. You've probably seen some of the people in the last couple weeks venting on social media about NASCAR and many other tracks' recent cooler policies. A lot of tracks are not allowing you to bring in your own cooler into the track, as was kind of custom for many, many years. Many of these tracks are citing, COVID protocols. You got to bring clear bags into the track so we don't have to dig through your stuff and touch everything. That kind of has moved over to coolers, but as the pandemic has kind of, in many ways, ended amongst NASCAR crowds. A lot of NASCAR fans are probably wondering when the cooler situation will be amended. And my thing is, if NASCAR and racetracks, NASCAR-owned tracks, Dover-owned tracks like today, ISC, SMI-owned tracks, if NASCAR tracks aren't going to allow you to bring your own beverages into the facility, they better at least have enough concessions on hand to accommodate sellout crowds like they had today. As things begin to open back up, facilities begin to reach closer and closer to 100% capacity, the tracks need to be able to accommodate the high number of fans. And I feel like we've seen a few tracks, Texas Motor Speedway a couple weeks ago, Nashville today, Bristol, my personal experience with Bristol last summer. We're seeing tracks
fail to accommodate the larger and larger number of fans, and that's a problem that needs to be fixed. And the tracks I just named, I mean, Texas and Bristol are SMI tracks. This race was technically owned by Dover Motorsports. The problems are happening almost entirely across the board. So if we expect people to turn out to these races, spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on hotels, travel, tickets themselves, we got to get the basic things right. NASCAR tracks need to be able to accommodate the many, many fans, whether that's more efficient parking situations, whether that's just having enough water bottles at the facility to accommodate your sellout crowd. Things need to change, and need to change quickly. As things open up, fans are expecting the bare minimum from these tracks, and unfortunately it sounds like they're not getting them in some cases. I saw really long lines at the concession stands today before the race, during the race, and it sounds like they ran out of supplies very, very quickly. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because that has been a hot topic of conversation. Now let's get to the race. There's not a lot to talk about there because Kyle Larson, it felt like, led every single lap. I know he didn't. I think he led like 252 of 300 laps, but he basically led nearly every green flag lap. He was untouchable. Nobody, and the guys in the room here can attest to it, nobody looked like they were in Kyle Larson's league all day long. Did anybody look like they were going to be Kyle Larson? Danny shaking his head. Jarrett?
I mean, Stenhouse was all right.
Stenhouse was fun to watch.
Stenhouse made a run. Chastain looked like he might get on fuel mileage there at the end, but yeah, nobody was going to catch him.
Stenhouse was the only car I thought it looked like it was comparable to Larson.
Stenhouse was fun, but he was not catching Kyle Larson. Well, we'll talk about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Either way, Kyle Larson got the win today, running away with it. This is his 4th points-paying win of the season, but it's also his 4th win straight if you include the All-Star race. Kyle Larson's on a roll. He's the hottest driver in motorsports, period. He's arguably the best and most talented driver in North America. At least that's in my opinion. These guys in the room might disagree with me, but this is not their show. This is my show. My opinion is that he's the best. But you can't deny he's the hottest. He is winning everything under the sun. Any car he gets into, any track he goes to, he is winning, or at the very least contending for the win. He is the hottest thing in NASCAR right now. Hendrick Motorsports across the board is really fast, but what today proved to me is that it's not really Hendrick Motorsports. I mean, Alex Bowman kind of sucked today. Chase Elliott was all right. You know, he had moments. He did win stage 1, although he got disqualified later on. We'll talk about that. William Byron was competitive late, but no one was catching Kyle Larson, not even his teammates this week. And I thought that was interesting because most of the season, Hendrick cars have all kind of flocked together. Not today. It was Kyle Larson and then everybody else, including his teammates. I don't know what Kyle Larson's weakness is. I think it's super speedways. That's about the only track, you know, the equalizer that is super speedway racing. That's the only place he's not favored to win at right now. Every track on the schedule, he's the favorite until further notice, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Let's talk about the top finishers in this race because there are a lot of other notable drivers I want to give shout outs to. These guys we're talking about, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He comes home with a top 10 finish after running up front and actually finishing second, I believe, in stage 1, or maybe it was stage 2. I don't remember off the top of my head. But he ran up in the top 5. He actually moved forward from the drop of the green flag in that JTG Doherty equipment. That's pretty fantastic to see. You see a lot of other great names in here. Both Ross Chastain and Kurt Busch end up with top 10s. Ross Chastain gets a runner-up finish. I believe that's his best finish of his NASCAR Cup Series career. So a really good day for Chip Ganassi Racing, but also a great day for SHR. Yeah, Cole Custer had a brake failure. Many drivers did, and he hit the wall and finished many laps down. But Kevin Harvick and Eric Almirola, oh, he needed a good day. Both come home with top 5 finishes, so great, strong run overall for SHR. Daniel Suarez, Trackhouse, they came on strong late, drove from like 15th to 7th. I was watching him and Ross Chastain that final stage because they were the only ones really consistently moving forward and making things happen. Larson was gone at that point. He was literally toying with the field. I noticed, and I tweeted this from my seats, he was clearly shutting the engine off right as he passed the start-finish line. He did that like 8-10 laps in a row before he finally, got back on the gas. But even during the time he was heavily conserving fuel, he was still pulling away from William Byron and the rest of the field. The dude was just toying with the field, kind of like Tony Stewart in the SRX race the other night. Austin Dillon finishes 12th, important because he's just a couple positions above the 16th place cut line. Corey LaJoie, talked to him on the grid right before the race. He said, man, we might finish 22nd if we're lucky. He comes home with a top 15. Good for him. Great run. We got to talk about Chase Elliott because it looked like he was going to get a top 15, but he was disqualified after the race. NASCAR found 5 loose lug nuts, not obviously all on the same tire, but across all 4 tires. That's worthy of a disqualification, so he ends up finishing 39th, and I believe he loses the credit for that stage win. Ryan Blaney had a brake failure early on in this race, hit the wall really, really hard. He comes home at 37th. Bubba Wallace had a couple issues as well. He ran over something on the racetrack that led him to spin out. He then spun out later off on all by himself. Chris Buescher had an issue, a similar issue to Blaney, and I mentioned earlier Cole Custer. So a lot of brake issues. Nashville Super Speedway, I mean, it's called a super speedway in the traditional sense. It's only 1 1/3 miles long, so kind of looks like an intermediate, like a mile and a half, but it races, according to many of the drivers, more like a short track, closer to like a Dover maybe, or like a Phoenix or New Hampshire, where you're hard on the brakes to get your car to turn through those tight corners. But there you have it. Those are your top finishing results. Last thing we have to do in this video is put this race on the groovy gauge. That's right, the groovy gauge made the trip to Tennessee here in the Danny B Clubhouse. IDK player came up with that name. That's a good name. All right, but here we go, the groovy gauge. Wha-bam! This is gonna be a tough race to score, as any race that I watch in person is. You know, most of the time I'm watching the race on TV at home, just like most of you, but when I am at the race in person, it gives you a completely new perspective. I enjoyed this race, partially because it was something new, partially because, again, the facility, once you managed to get into the facility, and hopefully if you were hydrated, was really, really nice and was really inviting. Great to see a full sellout, 40,000 fan strong crowd, but I'm gonna try not to hold Kyle Larson's dominance over this score. You know, I think this track was just the latest in a line of victims of Kyle Larson, who's just stinking up the show week in, week out. So if we ignore Kyle Larson, the battles, even the finish from second place on back, Chastain made that late race pass to get that second spot. Those are pretty fantastic all race long. I think throughout the weekend we saw the groove widen a bit, and I think that led to better and better racing. So overall today, if I don't factor in Larson's dominance too heavily, this was a good race. Now, Larson dominating was a major part of the event, so we do have to, at least give that some note. I'm really going back and forth. I'm gonna give this race a 70% on the groovy gauge. I think it's skewed somewhat by the fact that it was new, by the fact that I was there in person and got to see every battle on track. Whatever battle I wanted to watch, I could see it from my seat clear as day, and that was wonderful. But, the most deserving driver won. I think that's a good thing. I don't think the best driver should be getting screwed every week, by some crazy restart, or, Byron got loose and almost got up into Larson late in this race. That could have taken both of them out of the race. That would have been shocking and, unpredictable, but it also been kind of lame because the best driver and team wouldn't have gotten the finish they deserved. So I'm going to give it a 70%, but I'll be really curious to see what your score is on your own personal groovy gauge. Now, one thing I didn't talk about in this video that I'm sure many of you want to hear my thoughts on is the NBC broadcast. NBC took over the Cup Series schedule beginning this weekend at Nashville. I don't have much to say because I didn't really watch much of the broadcast. I was in the media center at the beginning of the race, so I did hear and see some of the pre-race show with Kyle Petty, Dale Jarrett, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Steve Letarte, Jeff Burton, Rick Allen in the booth. They sounded pretty good. Sounded like they hadn't missed a beat since last season, but I don't really have much else to say about that. I'll get back to you on it, next week or a couple weeks down the line. We'll talk about the broadcast some more. But again, let me know your thoughts of how NBC handled this weekend down in the comments below. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. Thank you all so much to everyone who came up and said hi during the weekend, took selfies, talked some racing, all that great stuff. I really appreciate it. I also appreciate the support I get from those of you on Patreon. Thanks to you guys, I'm able to take this show on the road, and I really hope you all enjoy the video that comes out here in a couple days. A real up-close view of a NASCAR Cup Series race day, and it's been a while since I've done one of those, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm leaving the Danny B Clubhouse tomorrow morning, so I'll be on the road. I'm going to Charlotte to film some cool stuff, and so you'll see me in a different setup here very soon, but we'll have plenty more to discuss later on this week. Thanks again to Hitchfire Grills for hooking us up this weekend. I will see you all in the next video. Have a fantastic rest of your night. Or morning, because I'm uploading this at like almost 2 in the morning. Oh gosh, it's been that kind of week, right? Yeah, they can attest to it. Exhausted.